I want to welcome everyone to this afternoon session in the International Research Mobility Symposium. My name is Carol Payne. I'm Associate Dean for Research and International in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences here at Carleton University. And I have the great pleasure this afternoon of who are going to talk about their experiences with international research mobility. And we're going to follow them across very diverse research work, including sustainable development goals, efficient communications, and US gun policies. So a wide range of material. I'm going to begin by introducing our first speaker for this panel. Each of our speakers will talk for 10 minutes, one after the other, and that will leave us some time at the end for discussion. If you have questions, please send them into the chat, and I'll read out the questions for our invited speakers to introduce. And I'm really looking forward to their talks, but also to the discussion as well. So without further ado, I'll begin with our first speaker. Our first speaker is Theodora Aryee. She is a PhD accounting candidate at the University of Ghana Business School. And she's an affiliate also of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. Her research interests include governance, sustainability, professional development, and ethics in accounting. With her unique exposure to both academia and industry, Theodora is keen on helping bridge the gap between both worlds and becoming a key part of the research community that contributes to the increase in knowledge on non-governmental organization governance, on professional development of accountancy, and also on accountability issues in the achievement of sustainable development goals, especially in terms of climate action goals. So with these very timely, pertinent, and important topics, I'm going to turn things over to Theodora.
Thank you, Prof. Payne. It's a real privilege to be here this afternoon for Ottawa and this evening from Ghana. So like Prof said, my name is Theodora and I'm with the Department of Accounting, University of Ghana. This afternoon, I'll be presenting on spectators or participants, businesses and accountants' role in the Sustainable Development Goals. The next slide, please. When we look at the accountancy profession space currently, there is a lot of emphasis on trying to stay dynamic and fresh as a profession and also continue to be relevant irrespective of the numerous changes that are happening in the world. One of such changes that the world is witnessing is the promulgation of the UN Sustainable Development Goal as a programmed agenda for ensuring sustainable development all across the world. My research was largely motivated on a study by Berbinting and Unaman 2018, where with that study, they called for accountants to look at sustainable development goals with a fresh lens, and that the accountant field needed to have a new perspective into sustainability using the sustainable development goals as a lens. What is interesting about the current sustainable development goals is that unlike the previous goals, which were the Millennium Development Goals, the sustainable development goals called for businesses to play an active role in ensuring its efficacy. And so unlike the previous one, here, businesses were called to take a forefront in this agenda. Thus, the accounting professional also comes in to ensure and play an essential role in helping to direct and guide corporate behavior. In every business business setting, the accounting professional is one of those people who guides corporate behavior as to whether a company or a business is going to play a key role in a particular agenda or not. If we look at the accounting circles, one key thing that we observe from the International Financial Federation of Accountants paper, where they had a workshop with UK accountants, when they looked at the sustainable development goals, they enumerated 8 out of the 17, where to them, and looking at their context, they felt that those 8 had a direct link with accounting. However, I know one has told us that with the implementation, or literature has told us that with the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, context is a key parameter. And what might have been prioritized in a developing country such as Ghana may be different from what may be the priority area of a developing country. And so with my work, I set out to first understand how the Ghanaian contemporary professional accountants, where I'll refer to this as the CPA. So for me, the CPA means the contemporary professional accountant. So for the contemporary professional accountant, how they tend to understand sustainable development. Because I believe as an orientation that knowledge is constructed. And so I believe that there may be an idea of what the literature is saying sustainable development meant, but I wanted to find out from their CPAs what sustainable development meant to them. And then in turn, look at how they are working to help achieve the sustainable development goals. And from the data that I gathered, which by the time I was coming to Carleton, I had done some interviews. And so during my time at Carleton, it was a good time to analyze the data and then talk to a few Carleton professors as to some of the information that I was getting from the data. Some of the findings from my study included the fact that when you look at how the CPAs constructed or conceptualized sustainable development, they tend to emphasize on economic development. They also emphasize on the social aspects of sustainable development. However, in their explanation, the environmental aspect of the conceptualization of sustainable development was quite weak. However, they believed that they were relevant because of the nature of the role they played in organization and because the accountancy profession itself is noted to be a public interest one. However, when we went on in our study to ask or to find out how much they knew about the sustainable development goals, it was interesting to observe that there was quite very little knowledge or very minimal level of knowledge about the goals itself, in terms of how much they knew about the goals. In the area of also trying to ask them, okay, so look at what happened in the UK with what they believed was directly related to accounting, they prioritized 8 out of the 17. But in our context, we observed that the prioritization was on goal 4, which talked about quality education, goal 5, which spoke about the gender equality, goal 8, which talks about decent work and economic growth, goal 9, which talks about infrastructure and industry. So these were the 4 goals that the CPAs in Ghana prioritized as areas that the accountants could play key role. However, it was interesting to note that when it came to goal 13, they believed that they did not have any role to play in it, or they did not envision or see any relationship with goal 13 and the accountancy profession. This was not quite surprising, especially because from my submission earlier, I've already indicated that in their understanding of sustainable development, the environmental aspect was weak in how they understood it. And we also can explain it by saying that the things that matter to participants in a developing economy might differ from the issues that may matter to a developing context. So these were some of the things that my study tried to look at. Shall we go to the next slide, please? Then I wanted to now see whether there was indeed a business case for this argument of climate action. As accountants, a number of us would want to see the figures before we support certain causes. So the question I was asking was that, is there even a business case for climate action? In an article by The Guardian on 10th July 2017, the article was titled, "Just 100 companies are responsible for 71% of global emissions." And so there was no doubt that indeed businesses were a key contributor to the issue of climate change. And so they needed to be more concerned about it. In terms of losses, what I saw also with information I came across even in my time in Canada was an infographic from CPA Canada's climate change infographic, which said that losses from weather-related disasters alone had been increasing dramatically to about $4.9 billion a year. And if I'm an accounting professional, these are numbers that we needed to be concerned about. And so we could not just remain spectators and just keep observing the space and allowing the environmentalists and the scientists to lead the discussion. There was a need for businesses and, for that matter, accountants to play an active role in ensuring that we take urgent action to combat climate action. I believe that we can all see the CNN article that says that climate is the biggest risk to business. And so if climate is purported to be the biggest risk to businesses, as business officials and accountants, we needed to pay particular attention to that which is going to affect our businesses negatively. So the question we were asking was, how were businesses going to play an active role in this endeavor? And then we observed that we could raise awareness. There could be awareness raising in the business community, and we should be able to break the follower syndrome. There was a need to break the follower syndrome as well and take urgent steps as business people to be part of this. And so these were how the accountants or business professionals could take an active role. In terms of my experience, please, the next slide, please. In terms of my experience in Carleton, I'll just touch on it quite briefly and then I'll be out of here. During my time at Carleton, it really enhanced my work because we worked with, so you can see Jim in the picture, which is Ottawa Biosphere Eco City, where we helped to develop a follow-up plan. They were engaged in going from countries like West Carleton to develop sustainability plans for them. And so we helped them with a follow-up plan so that these plans could be achieved. We also had presentations, which caused me to actually deeply think about my work as well. But what I loved about the QES experience was the interdisciplinary approach. I was a business person, and the only business person in my group, I had computer scientists, engineers, and geographers. And these discussions on climate change sometimes were new to me as a business person. And so that has also spared my work in a positive way, to look at these issues also from a perspective of a business person. My writing was improved as well as my presentation through the various presentations and posters Professor Onita also helped us to do. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Theodora. That was fascinating. Really appreciate that. I'm going to introduce our next speaker now. Omid Abbasi was born in 1989 in Hadashar, East Azerbaijan in Iran. He received a BSc degree in electrical engineering from the University of Tabriz in Tabriz, Iran in 2011, and an MSc degree in electrical engineering from Amir Kabir University of Technology in Tehran Polytechnic in Tehran, Iran in 2015, and the PhD degree in electrical engineering from Sahand University of Technology in Tabriz, Iran in 2020. Since February 2019 and up to September 2020, he was a visiting researcher with the Department of Systems and Computer Engineering here at Carleton. Omid is currently a postdoctoral fellow also at Carleton, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Abbasi.
Thank you, Professor Payne. This is Omid, and my speech is about what the experience I've had at Carleton University. The title for my speech is "Looking for More Efficient Ways for Communication," and the sky is the limit. We will see how it's related to our research areas. As Professor Payne said, my home university when I was visiting PhD student at Carleton was Sand University of Technology, Tabriz, Iran. Next slide, please. Yeah, here we can see how I came from my home university to Carleton University. I started my PhD at 2015 at Sand University of Technology, and my supervisor there was Professor Afshin Ebrahimi, as we can the picture, and also the picture of my home university. Then at February 2019, I actually won a scholarship to have a visit in our actually field in the world. And as Carleton University, and especially Professor Halim Yanık Ömeroğlu from SCE department was very active in my field, which was aerial networks and aerial communication and generally space communication. I decided to have a visit at Carleton University and also have collaboration with the groups of Professor Halim. From my home country and my home university to Carleton, there was some differences, which I want to talk a little bit about them. Maybe the main important difference between these two was this travel, I believe, was a space-time travel for me. And by that, I mean that it was not only moving in space and moving from Iran to Canada, it was also moving in time. That is, my home country is actually a developing country, and here Canada is a developed country that we have a lot of technology, a lot of actually facilities that we didn't have in Iran, and also all these technology will be in the future in Iran. So I should say that my travel was both in space and time. The other difference between these actually two countries was and is the weather. That there was like 25-degree difference in temperature when the first day that I arrived at Ottawa, which was almost I was not able to tolerate that difference. Very tough days. Actually, I arrived, as I said, at February into Ottawa, and it was like minus 34, 35 degree. And yeah, as I said, very cold days. And the other thing that actually differs was actually the language. And for first days, I was, whenever I was going, I was asked that, do you speak English? And I didn't have any clue to answer. I didn't know whether it is yes or no. If I was saying yes, they were speaking English very fluently, and I was not able to catch that. When I was saying no, no communication anymore. So yeah, something in between. And also the other difference was the spelling of my name. The answer to what's your name was not my Omid Abbasi, which is my name. I was supposed to spell my name every time that I've been asked this question, and that was another difference that was at those days. So yeah, please next slide. About my research at Carleton and back to my home university, my research actually I'm working on telecommunication engineering, which is mostly linked to mathematics. So I don't want to go to the math of my work a lot. I want to just talk about in brief what we've done without any formulas. Professor Halim's groups, as I said, is very active, is really one of the pioneers in the aerial networks over the world. And I was started to work on aerial networks back in my home country, and my proposal for my PhD was about these aerial networks. The idea here is that in conventional way of providing connectivity for us, as we have in 4G, 3G, even now in 5G, the base stations and actually the places that provide us connectivity are on the ground. That means we put these base stations on the ground, on the towers, on the posts, so that we can get connectivity with them, and they have some antennas on them, which whenever we stand and connect to them, and they connect us to the core network. But recently, it has been proposed that we can use drones or unmanned aerial vehicles. We can utilize them to provide connectivity for some areas that doesn't have access to these terrestrial base stations. So what we do is that we put some base station over, under these drones with some antennas under them, so that these drones could be work as a base station to provide connectivity for us, especially for the cases like the vehicular networks. That means we have some vehicles that are moving in the network, and due to their movements, sometimes they lose their connectivity to these base station, or sometimes due to some blockages, some buildings or so, this link between the base station and these vehicles is disconnected. And at those cases that there is no link between the vehicles and the base station, we propose to use drones as a relay. That means they just receive the signal from vehicles and relay and actually retransmit these signals towards the base station. And from the base station, the signals goes to the core network. So our idea here was to apply these drones, and these drones are very efficient. Why we call the title of this speech is efficient communication, because these drones can get closer to the vehicles and any users, so that they have very strong link, and the strong link means high bandwidth and high efficiency in data rates. So yes, because of this, and also they can also have a line of sight link with users, and all these benefits from drones could increase the data rate that we can achieve via wireless communication with aerial networks. And in this work, we find the optimum trajectory of the drone, that, for example, if it's gonna to serve some terrestrial vehicles, how this drone should have movements to provide connectivity for these terrestrial networks. So this was, in essence, what we've done. Actually, as I said, there is a lot of mathematics behind these things, so I didn't want to go to them. And our proposed method especially have some application in autonomous driving. In that case, these vehicles are going to they don't have actually drivers anymore, and they just require a strong communication link. So this drone can help in those situations for us. And the integration of the drones to the terrestrial networks, what we have in 4G and 5G, has not been standardized yet. And we hope that for beyond 5G, like 6G, we will have these drones as a part of networks. So yeah, next slide, please. So yeah, the sky is the limit. Actually, uh, we utilize the sky to provide connectivity. Actually, it is not over with uh, the aerial networks. Space communication and satellites also are part of the circle that we can utilize them to provide connectivity. The result of our research was published in one journal and one conference paper. The conference was at Vancouver. It was VTC, IEEE VTC conference. And yeah, working under supervision of Professor Halim, one of the pioneers in the field, was a valuable experience for me during my visit at Carleton University. Due to COVID situation, I was not able to go back to my home university to defend, and my PhD defense was online on September 2020. And after that, I've got a postdoctoral fellow job offer from my supervisor, Professor Halim, and now I'm here at Ottawa continuing the collaboration with my supervisor. Thank you everybody for your attention. And yeah, it's my pleasure to answer your question.
Thank you, Dr. Abbasi, very much. We'll have questions towards the end, but I'm going to go on to our third and final speaker now and introduce Noah Schwartz to you. Noah Schwartz is a PhD candidate here at Carleton University in political science. His research examines group politics and firearms policy in Canada and the United States. His doctoral project studied the use of narrative and memory by the guns rights movements in the United States using ethnographic field research. And he has a website, www.noahschwartz.ca, where you can learn even more about his research. But I know that Noah is going to be introducing us to this material now. So I'll turn things over to you, Noah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Payne. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being with me here today. And if we go to the next slide, I'll get started. So my project is about how storytelling shapes policy. It seems only appropriate, therefore, to begin with a story. While it was still technically spring, no one had bothered to tell the scorching West Virginia sun. The rays sear any skin that I dared to leave exposed. My sunscreen long since sweated away. I blink away the perspiration from my stinging eyes and struggle to aim the borrowed handgun at the center of the target in front of me. The instructor is putting us through a series of rigorous shooting drills. Draw, hold, fire, he barks. These drills teach us the critical components of using a firearm to defend your life. All the while, the instructor tells us stories of past defensive encounters and what he considers the importance of armed citizenship. I walk up to within 5 feet of the target as our next drill is close range shooting. In Hollywood shootouts, opponents are separated by large distances, but most real-world defensive encounters, we are told, happen up close. I clean off my fogged up safety glasses with the sleeves of my green khaki shirt and prepare for the instructor's call. On his signal, I empty 5 rounds into the target. A few weeks earlier, I'd been back in my office in Ottawa, in the 4-person office I share with some of my fellow graduate students. My day had consisted of reading, writing, and teaching, a consistent and comfortable rhythm, punctuated by the occasional latte at the campus cafe. We debated Marx and Locke, not Colt and Glock. Now I was at the center of one of the most heated debates in American politics. Geographically, I wasn't that far from home, especially when you compare it with some of the esteemed colleagues who I've had the pleasure of hearing speak today. But socially, I was a world away. Thanks to generous funding from SSHRC and MyTax, I spent the summer of 2019 with the National Rifle Association of America, trying to find out more about how the organization tells stories in order to build a political community of gun owners. So when most of you think about the NRA, I'm assuming you're thinking about lobbying and campaign donations. But something you might not know is that the organization in a given year actually spends more on their teaching and communication. NRA instructors teach about 750,000 Americans every year. Their magazines regularly reach over 2 million people. The organization has 3 museums, and up until a few years ago, they even had their own online television network. The work that the NRA does in these respects is just as important for their political program as their lobbying, but little research has looked into it. NRA communications material often takes the form of a narrative, what we would call storytelling, which scholars are increasingly realizing is a really big part of political. Their publications and their instructors tell these stories. They tell stories about good guys with guns, stories about America's past, stories about real-world defensive shootings. These stories are important for the NRA to gather and motivate supporters, creating a community of gun owners that is very easily mobilized towards advocacy. Studying them helps us to understand why gun owners are more likely to vote, write their elected representative, and take political action than non-gun owners. In order to study American gun politics and gun culture, I used ethnographic research methods. Ethnography involves combining several research methods together to gain a more holistic or grounded view of your research issue. The focus is on understanding the everyday reality of your participants and how this reality translates into their political behavior. I also wanted to understand how the NRA works from the ground up. So my fieldwork began in late April 2019 when I drove to Indianapolis, Indiana for the NRA annual meeting. The annual meeting is like a comic book convention for gun owners. 80,000 NRA members were gathered together to explore a 15-acre convention center that was filled with over 800 booths promoting and selling everything from guns to accessories to exotic hunting trips, basically anything a gun owner could dream of. As Dr. Taylor said this morning, understanding the marketplace is essential to understanding culture. So gun shows like this provide an excellent window into the gun culture. The annual meeting also featured panels and speeches, and there I listened to prominent speakers like NRA leader Wayne LaPierre and politicians like Mike Pence, Ted Cruz, and yes, even then President Donald Trump. Following the excitement of the convention, I drove to my primary field site in Fairfax, Virginia, where I had secured a position as a visiting scholar at George Mason University. There I spent 3 months inside the gun culture. My fieldwork involved participant observation in 5 NRA firearms safety classes, which included learning to do things like shoot handguns, shotguns, and rifles. I conducted interviews with NRA employees and ordinary NRA members. I went to the gun range to learn about the social practices of the gun culture. And I learned to shoot 2 of the most controversial firearms in the American gun debate, the Glock handgun and the AR-15 rifle. My research also included conducting a museum analysis of the NRA National Firearms Museum and attending several gun shows. In Lynchburg, Virginia, I even set up my own booth at a gun show to try to recruit participants for my online survey. So if we move to the next slide, you can actually see a picture of that booth. So there in the picture on the left, you see me with my project logo at the gun show recruiting participants. And the other picture is me at George Mason. That's a statue of George Mason, from whom the school gets its name. So before conducting my international research project, I didn't really understand why anyone would want a gun. I didn't grow up around guns. I never really knew any hunters or sport shooters growing up. American gun culture was something that I saw in the news. During my field work, I met a lot of really interesting people who defied stereotypes and complicated the way that I think about American gun culture. I met people like Susan. All of these names, by the way, are pseudonyms, but I met people like Susan, an office worker and triathlete. Susan started shooting with her father, who'd passed away only a few short months before we met. For Susan, taking her dad's old revolver out to the range was a way of staying connected with his memory. I met Timothy and Sam, a father and son navigating the complex social landscape that comes with being African-American gun owners. Though Timothy's job as a pilot and Sam's university career kept the two apart for long months at a time, going to the gun range was always a way for them to reconnect. For my participant Bucky, who actually took time on his birthday to sit down and talk with me, guns were in his blood. He grew up hunting in the deer woods of Virginia and became a passionate competitive shooter, taking part in dozens of competitions a year in addition to his full-time career. We often talk about how globalization has made the world smaller and allowed us to connect with people from across the globe. This very symposium is proof of that. But social media, algorithms, and the internet have divided us in different ways. In an era of increasing political division, it is harder and harder to engage with people we disagree with or who are different from us. My international field research gave me the opportunity to reach across that divide and engage with people very different from my friends, family members, and colleagues here at home. This experience gave me a better window into American gun culture and the advocacy that that culture inspires. I have translated these understandings into my doctoral dissertation, which I'll be defending in a matter of weeks, as well as my academic publications. I don't know if there's a solution to the polarization that we face as a society today, but I know that if we're going to find one, it begins with understanding the other. We need to try to cross no man's land and chart a course to dialogue on these difficult issues like gun control. I hope that doing research like this and telling stories like these can in some small way help us get there. Thank you. If you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, so as I said, if you want to learn more about my research, you can look me up, noahschwartz.ca, at noahschwartz on Twitter, or check out some of my publications. Thank you really very much for your attention today.
Thank you so much, Noah. I really enjoyed that. I'm going to ask all of our three wonderful speakers to turn their cameras back on. And this is the portion where we respond to questions that have been coming in from the audience. And so there were comments and questions for Theodora. One just comment was about what a great advocate you are, an exemplar for the QESAS program. So someone wanted to congratulate you, Theodora, for that. And also there was a second question for you, Theodora. What are some practical methods that companies can apply to their businesses to become more sustainable, development oriented? Just a couple of practical things.
Okay, so the first thing is that sustainable financing. And when I say sustainable financing, what I mean is that we need to look for ways to invest in a sustainable manner. And we need to, as businesses, begin to think of our choices. For instance, I came across an example of Walmart, where in the short term, what they had actually done was that they had used sustainable material to construct one of their shops. And what it was going to do for them was that in a year, just because of the decision to use sustainable materials to construct that particular shop, they were going to save $1 million a year in terms of energy cost. And so when we choose sustainable options to invest in as businesses, then sometimes someone will say that struggle in the short term and then recoup the benefit in future whilst helping to also save the planet. So that's one thing I would say. And another thing I would also say is we need to break the follower syndrome. In the business community, we want other people to try and succeed before we move into this space. But I believe that it starts with one business at a time, thinking of sustainable options, green options to build that particular business. In Africa now, we have options. There's a place in Ghana, the Aryee University, where they try to incubate young minds on new and sustainable options to go into business, innovative way of going into business. So all these things are practical ways that businesses can go for the sustainable options that exist to them.
Thank you so much, Theodora, for those practical interpretations. I'm going to go on to a question to Omid now from one of the audience members who asks, what are some of the challenges expected with aerial drone networking?
Yes, actually, there are a lot of challenges. The first one is the drones are not able to carry, a lot heavy weights. The antennas there are heavy sometimes, and the drones are not able to carry those antennas. So we are not able to do the same thing with the terrestrial base stations with the drones. And the other challenges is the drones, actually the channel that we have between the drones and the terrestrial users are not known by now in the telecommunication academic researchers, as it is very new, and sometimes for the terrestrial ones we have a lot of research in the academia and even in industry, but for the drones, as I said, because it is not standardized yet. So we are working on how we can model these channels to get the best actually connectivity for terrestrial users.
Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to ask a question myself to Noah. To riveting research, it seems like there were a couple of things going on in your research. One is this very impassioned call to challenge polarization, a world where we only listen to the people who are going to tell us what we already think. And to, as a case study, to challenge that, you've actually picked one of the most polarizing topics I think you could have picked. Gun ownership, which really truly does divide people. Can you talk a little bit about how this very invigorating research might be transferable to other areas too, as well as what is a crucial political issue right now, gun ownership?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. With regards to polarizing research, so my supervisor does Israel-Palestine. So I think, I come from a scholarly lineage of people doing controversial topics. And I think one of the things that I've learned about doing research on controversial topics, I mean, first of all, as a researcher, it's good for you because, people are interested, they want to hear about these topics. It can be challenging to translate the things that you observe and the things you observe about the people that you meet to different audiences. And I often find myself speaking to different audiences with my work. So wanting to give a fair representation of the lives and thoughts and feelings of my participants and not wanting to sort of do them an injustice by misrepresenting them, but at the same time trying to translate their lived experience and make it accessible to an audience that's very, very different from them. Because I think that I really do think that taking the time to study people who are different from us, who we disagree with, who come from different walks of life, can be such a powerful vector for healing the divides that we have right now in society, whether you're doing that research sort of internationally far from home or in a neighboring country.
Thank you. That's great. I know we're sort of running out of time, but I have another question for all three of our wonderful speakers. Boy, I really learned a lot from all of you, so thank you so much. I was realizing that international study and international research and interdisciplinarity sort of overlap in all of your work. Can you talk a little bit about the intersection of interdisciplinarity and international study?
Okay, I'd like to go first. Okay, so one thing I realized was that when I got into Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Program that brought me to Carleton, I realized I did not know anything about climate change, even though I had come into a climate change program. And what I realized was that you cannot underestimate the importance of interdisciplinary research and approach for postgraduate education, because I realized that I had gone to school for 10 years, and as a business person, my access to even people and other disciplines who were right even with me in Ghana was very minimal. And so I saw the environmentalists talking, I saw other people talking, but I observed that as a business person, there were a lot of these basic information that was related to business that I had never heard about. But for an opportunity like this QES program to bring these groups together, to hear a computer scientist talking about climate change, to hear an engineer talking about climate change. And actually, that was the part that spurred the second part of my work. Because originally, I was just looking at how the accountants can play a role in sustainable development goals. But after coming to listen from the geographers, from the engineers, I observed that what is the business person doing about a problem they are contributing to? And so that was a great eye-opener for me, really, through that program. Thank you.
Yes.
I realize I've led us astray because I think we're supposed to go on to the next session, which is starting right now. So I'm sorry. It's an index of how fascinating all of your work is that I could just keep talking with you all afternoon. So I'm really sorry that I think we have to close it up and go to the next session. But I did want to say personally, thank you very much. I've learned very much, and I think the audience did too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I think we go out and then go into the other thing. Yes.
Thank you, Prof. Payne. It was a pleasure. Noah and Dr. Abbasi.
Thanks. So nice to meet you
Yeah,
all.
pleasure
Nice
to
to
you
meet
all.
you all.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take
Thanks to
care.
everyone who came.
Okay, bye.